I'm really struggling, the three of you, and I'll tell you why. I keep comparing this back to the Derek Thompson case, where he passively refused to get out of the car.
Sir, please do not touch me, sir.
Keep your phone out.
Sir, please do not touch me.
See, that's where we're coming to a disagreement.
It's not about
I'm giving you to the count of three. You don't do this.
Sir,
don't do it.
I'm
Don't
not
do it,
touching
man.
this officer. It's
Don't
on
do
camera.
it.
My hand is by
Step
my
out of
head.
the car right
I'm
now.
being threatened.
Now you're
I'm being
under arrest.
threatened.
Now you're
I'm being
under arrest
threatened,
for
sir.
disobeying the
I
law
was
and commands
being
of an officer.
disobeying.
I'm giving you
lawfully
to the count
detained.
of three.
This officer has threatened me, and I'm
One,
making it known I am no threat to this
two.
officer. I've been threatened.
Watch the show,
My
folks.
life is in danger. My life is in danger.
How do you like that? How do you like that?
And finally, that officer grabbed him and pulled him out of the car. I keep hearing everybody saying everything that these cops did wrong, but I haven't heard anyone tell me exactly what they've done wrong yet. What did they do illegal? What did they do wrong to him? I've heard the stop was lawful. I've heard you have to get out of the car. I've heard you don't have to tell him what the reason is for the stop. I've heard virtually everything to excuse all of this, but we all keep saying that they're wrong. What did they do wrong? Anybody?
How about talk to someone like they're a human being? The initial stop was because of registration, and then that's number one. Number two, he was driving slowly somewhere, and eventually he pulled over, put his hands out. So assess the situation. Why is what I keep saying.
Here's why I'm struggling with it, Eric. You and all of us in that other case ruled the cop, even after he said, you're going to get your ass whooped in front of Lord and all creation. We all said that cop was justified in pulling Derek Thompson out of the car. Heather, don't give me that look. You said it was justified.
Not trying to think of what
he did.
He was passively resisting and would not get out of the car.
Yeah, I think he was passive aggressive, which was a little different than what we saw with the lieutenant. Although
Correct.
the lieutenant wasn't complying, he was trying to get an explanation of why he was pulled over, why guns are drawn, and why he's about to be put face down into the ground. So
okay, great, perfect, understood. Yes, I totally agree with you. They didn't talk to him like a human being at all.
Right.
I keep going back to, you're scared, you should be scared.
Yeah.
And it's riding the lightning son thing is the most ridiculous thing I ever heard in my life. Again, not what did the cops say that made him a jerk. Where did he do something illegal that he's being sued for?
I don't think the cops thought that they were wrong, to be honest with you. Up until at first, my impression was that they were backtracking a little bit, but then when I saw the entire thing and they had just talked to their chief about the options, I don't think that they really believed that they were wrong. I thought that that they were trying to present, and this happens all the time on the street. You know, we have to understand what happened. What they call a street adjustment to an incident is. And of course, we see it all here because it's all on camera. But it's a legitimate thing in this regard. Yeah, he's about ready to get promoted. Okay, he has to. The police call his commanding officer and say, "Hey, we just booked a guy. He's here for a failure to comply with the police command, obstruction of justice, all this other blah blah blah." And believe me, a registration, which may seem trivial to somebody outside, might seem not so trivial to somebody in the Uniform Code of Military Justice commanding officer who may or may not like this guy or whatever. Okay, I'm saying it's a risk of him being marked as someone who had a problem with law enforcement, and they're offering him the option of saying, "Hey, you would have been on your way if you would have complied." I think they necessarily believed that at the time that all this thing was unnecessary.
I think there should be some reasonable doubt that during COVID right now, government agencies were shut down for months, and they're still backlogged trying to catch up with registrations and whatnot.
Yeah. Right.
So why you aggressively go after someone like that? I don't know. We don't know. I haven't read anything that said he was speeding
No,
or
he was
driving
doing the
recklessly. What's that?
He was doing the opposite.
Driving slow.
Yeah.
He wasn't speeding.
Yeah. So,
Well,
to
in
me,
a sense,
reasonable doubt.
that's just kind of suspicious in a sense. I mean, if the police are behind you and you're driving, well, I'm telling you, if the police are out there and you're now there's 100 blue lights on you behind you telling you to stop, and you're just not stopping, here's what my mind is going to be: what is he doing in that car? Who's in that car? What's going on in that car? Is there a kidnapping victim in the car? Is there drugs in the car? Is he high? I don't know until I make that stop.
And if you want to just talk about suspicion, this certainly doesn't warrant anything. But if you want to talk about adding to suspicion, the darker the tinted windows, the more scary it is to approach the car, because you don't know, am I looking at the only occupant, or when I walk up there, are there 3 more guys with shotguns in the back? I don't know. But the tinted windows offer a little bit of a hesitation, fear factor. But again, I'm not saying that warrants anything in particular.
Cops are used to that.
Yeah, of course. And they're used to people driving slow, and they're used to expired. Dante Wright also stopped for expired registration or an expired license plate. Of course, then in the middle of that stop, then they find the warrant. But, there is certainly, Eric, I'm coming back to you. Certainly, in fact, I've been talking to people about this the last couple of days. Certainly, there is a conversation here to be had about what are the things that we want in this day and age the police pulling people over for. I would have that conversation all day long because, I think we have to adapt to a different time in society. And I think we have to adapt to some new things that aren't considered, not legally, aren't considered the crimes that they once were. And I think we have to start having more compassion for, quality of life type issues that are such minor infractions. But I also think we have to gauge that with still somehow enforcing the law, because we don't pressure people to register their cars just to be a pain in the butt. There's a reason for it. So should people be pulled over and threatened with guns? Probably not. But do we still want people to register their cars? Or should we all just be sovereign citizens?
I think, can I jump in here?
Yeah, please, come on.
I think this goes back to something that we've weaved in a few episodes that Joe was talking about, kind of like in the old days with having a beat or having a specific patrol and knowing the people in your neighborhoods and knowing the people that you're essentially policing or policing for, versus now when it's kind of an us versus them. In the past or previously, I know Joe's alluded to this, I've heard stories from other people about this, just that you could kind of see something not quite right on your regular beat, and it would be a kid that you knew because you knew everybody around, and it would be a bigger threat to go tell his mom than to actually like arrest him, jam him up, take him in, book him, blah, blah, blah. So there was a sense of kind of, does this all need to create a hostile situation, a hostile confrontational situation where now we have to put ourselves in a situation, and this goes back to something I said previously, that where there's case law where officers are not allowed to just put themselves in a situation where they don't have necessarily probable cause or reasonable suspicion to believe that somebody's armed or dangerous, but then insert themselves into the situation in such a way where they then get to be like, but I was afraid. That's not allowed. There's case law that roundly rejects anytime they try to say that. If they didn't have a reason to, yet inserted themselves violently into a situation, they can't then claim, oh, but I had to search them for weapons. No, you didn't. You didn't have to engage in that in the first place.
Sure.
So I think there needs to be maybe some in between of like you just said, what people have been asking me the same thing. Why do we need officers to be the ones, doing these ridiculous traffic stops for things that are to be dealt with, at City Hall, that they could take the plate, write it up, send him a thing in the mail, right? Send a ticket that just says you either have to pay this, contest it, or whatever. And then he gets to go and be like, yeah, but I have to pay a $500 fine because I had expired registration, or I had this or whatever. Same thing with some of these like lower level drug offenses now.
Let me stop you 1 second.
Yeah.
I don't want to change topic. I want to add to this. At what point does that have to be enforced when somebody simply just doesn't do it?
Well, I think I would say at the same time, if you don't make your mortgage payment or a payment for your apartment, you're getting kicked out. So if you don't pay your registration, you could have someone come and take your car.
Right.
Should I respond to this? Because I feel
Please,
strongly about
because
it.
that sounds like grand theft to me.
Well, here's the thing. Again,
Of course, the state can take your car. So
I grew up in a different era, but good policing, criminals use vehicles to move things that are when they're engaged in illegal activity. They move things on foot. They move weapons. They move proceeds. They conduct criminal conduct through mobile means for the most part. And so good street cops make a lot of stops, legal stops, okay? But that's when you find the kidnapped girl in the back seat. That's when you find, you make a note of a plate. Son of Sam in New York was caught because of parking tickets. The police went back and found some parking tickets in the area where he was supposedly, and that's how they got turned on to him, because police officers wrote parking tickets. Because police officers don't usually write parking tickets anymore. It's Department of Revenue. But what I'm saying is the idea of doing good police work is investigating what comes to your attention at the odd times and odd things. I mean, this vehicle caught their attention. He looks and sees this blacked out car. There's no plate in the bracket where it's supposed to be. Is there something there? I mean, I've stopped cars that supposedly had temporary plate, and it was like the guy made it in a Etch-a-Sketch machine or whatever. It was garbage. They just made it up himself. This is what we were taught was being good police officers in the area that you're responsible for. And it's, stopping people, stopping cars that come to your attention that may have something wrong, seeing somebody furtively go down an alley, going down that alley to see what they're about. That's pretty much been labeled as being taboo now. So it's anathema to a police officer that wants to be involved in helping his community to be stifled in that regard. I mean, if you want to do it, go ahead, but you're going to lose something here. And I'm not saying come out like gangbusters. Like I said, the turbochargers went on in this case, and it turned it into garbage immediately, okay? That caused an officer to get fired, even though his chief said it was okay to negotiate with this guy earlier. And it's a mess because basically he agreed that he fired him because the thing had gone viral and everybody was commenting on it. It looks again, we talked about this, Heather.
The optics.
With the guy that was passive in the car. It wasn't the fact that he was right to get out of the car. It was the way it all went down. It's the optics of it all, okay?
I like what you said too there, Joe, that kind of the turbocharging up of the situation. Instead of going up, you assess the situation. I think that's lost so frequently. Like you said, there's a difference between what this is, this type of stop, this type of stop. If you get to the stop and you're in the well-lit place and the guy's hands are out of the window, you might say, okay, this maybe isn't what we thought. This might just be plates that are messed up. Let's see. He seems to be calm. We can see his hands. He's outnumbered. Let's deal with this. He's calm. Let's be calm. Why do we have to take this up to such a way that, even after he's calm and you again see his hands, what's going on. He's pepper sprayed 3 times. He stops. He's sitting there. He's like, okay, I'm trying to breathe. Pepper sprays him again. You're not going to be able to until you get out and get on the ground. It's going to happen again. And he's like, I don't even want to reach for my seatbelt. He says, he's like, I don't even want to do anything right now. Can you do it? No, I'm not going to do it. And you're going to comply. And you're going to what is the point of that?
But like the woman that we talked about that was shot ultimately in the Dollar Tree parking lot, where she said you could see there's nobody. He's not here. It's not
right. He's not here. Right. Okay? I'm alone.
So it's like there's
exactly there's just the disconnect that I can't keep getting around of what is what is the hostility for? Just bring it back down. And like you
that's
said,
why we're doing
the
this.
younger guys seem to kind of be like, guy, just please, just get out, but the other one just obey. Like,
I can remember going up to vans that had smoked out windows while I was covering my partner who was stopping and thinking someone could be pointing a shotgun right at my head right now inside that van and I can't see him. Okay. But I'm taking that risk. So every time you give a little bit, you're taking a risk that you may not have to take. Okay. It hasn't anything to do with race or anything like that, or who was held down and all this other stuff. We could debate that for a long time, but I'm just saying it's right there at that moment, why you're doing what you're doing and how it's to be done. This shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen. I said that right at the beginning. It pained me to see the whole thing between the military and the police. There's disconnects between, it's like there used to be great relationships between nurses and police. There used to be great relationships with teachers and police, okay? What the hell happened? How did the police get nailed to be the bad guys of the United States when they're the ones that everybody goes to when the shit goes down and they're running towards the shots instead of away from it? And hundreds of police officers are laying in a grave with their kids growing up with no father. How does that happen? Why is what is the cause of this basic instinctive disconnect and anger and resentment? I don't know. Now, that's one of the reasons I'm doing this show, to maybe open it up and look at it.
That's a great question. I think.
I think there's a difference.
I think the majority of the people out there want the police to be able to do their job, but I think all people want to be treated like a human being and treated with dignity. And unfortunately, the videos that we're watching really show the side of an officer that is not that side for the most part, where we see an immediate escalation that causes more problems. And when you have a citizen that thinks that their rights are being violated when they're maybe not at the time, because that person with the gun still has the power. And I think a lot of people forget that, but the police also forget that they do have the power because they do have the gun the majority of the time, where your average citizen does not. So I kind of look at it as a sport where people can argue with the referee as much as they want, but the referee has that whistle and the referee has the power. So the officer needs to remember that at all times. And boy, I still need to do some research on how often an officer comes across a bad element. And maybe Joe, working at nighttime, I'm sure it happens a lot. So you get tainted a little bit, where maybe
where you work.
Almost everybody that you're seeing it could be a bad person.
Well, you can't judge. I've worked in some of the worst districts in the city, okay, relative to crime, and every different shift, okay. And I've worked in some of the best neighborhoods in the city under very different, every different watch, okay, every different shift. The day that you start to assume the nature of the stops you're making or of the clientele that you're dealing with, you're gonna get hurt, or somebody else is gonna get hurt.
Let me posit something to all of you. I think that we're going to see a little cycle play out, just a theory. We're going to see police officers now respond to this incident around the country and try to ease up a little bit on the tinted windows, on the expired registrations, and think about this incident and go, okay, certainly don't say something about ride the lightning. Don't be so aggressive. Okay, be a little easier. Until they pull over a truck with tinted windows and get killed, and then we'll see the cycle repeat itself and the police will get much harder again, at least locally. What do you guys think about that? I find that police are extremely responsive to events that happen. They evolve their training, they change their tactics. based on an event that they've seen, either a cop get hurt or a person get hurt. What do you think about that cycle? Is that possible?
But it should be, but to where I think on Joe's side, you should still be cautious. But we still have an incident in Minnesota where a kid was killed. So, near the same district as George Floyd. So I think, man, I think the police at this point, because of the rules that protect them, know that they're protected. And for the most part, they are getting away with something that they probably should be reprimanded for. And I know they're reprimanded for a lot of things, but to answer Joe's question earlier, I think the breakdown between citizen and police is just simply trust, the lack thereof. And I think if we go back and find a way to educate the general public about what their rights are, what they should do when they're pulled over, what they can do, what they can't do, I think maybe that will start to help alleviate some of this. But we still can't have officers come in at 100 miles per hour thinking that they're going to regain or gain control because of how loud they are, or because they have a gun drawn in your face. Although, again, they have a gun drawn in your face, I hope you would comply, but man, I just can't imagine. Well, I can't imagine because I've had a gun in my face before, but someone is yelling and shouting at you. You have your hands out the window. They're telling you to reach in and take your seatbelt off. There's no way I'm reaching inside and pulling a seatbelt out. I mean, there's just some crazy commands that I wouldn't follow because, well, and then knowing that I have a gun on the floor. I mean, there's just so many crazy things. And even if there wasn't a gun on the floor, you're taking your one hand out and taking your seatbelt off. I mean, that could have gone south easily. Because
then there's your furtive movement. Mm-hmm. So it becomes a damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you comply, you're too compliant. You're not doing enough of the things they're saying. If you comply, otherwise, something else goes wrong. He's got a gun. This happens, and you get shot. So I think there's also the discrepancy of, I know Joe said this, that there are hundreds of officers that because of doing their duties, hundreds of kids don't have a father. But the FBI releases statistics. I don't know if it's every year, but the most recent ones I was able to look at were the ones from 2019 of how many officers in the entire United States were killed in the line of duty. Some of them were from accidents. Some of them were from felonious things. I think it was only 89 total deaths of officers, and 40 something of them were from felonious acts, from the arrest or doing somebody that was committing a felony and that happened, versus how many civilians during interactions with police in 2019, and it was upwards of 1,000. So,
yeah, but the statistics again are misleading. How many unarmed blacks have been killed by police last year? A handful.
I didn't hear that question.
How many unarmed black people have been killed by the police? Like
last year, I think it was 19.
So, but the idea is the perception that people have is that there's thousands. Those thousands of people that have been injured in police shootings, they have to be analyzed of what they were doing.
That's true, but also the fact that there's a factor of more than 10 times more likely in any interaction with the police where it's not their duty to kill people. They're not judge, jury, and executioner. That it's by a factor, again, of more than 10 times.
They're shot.
I would argue that an unarmed citizen getting killed one time is too much.
Yeah, of course. It's one policeman gets killed is too much. Okay,
correct.
What I'm saying is
so how is it that big of a discrepancy though that it's 1,000 people, more than 1,000 versus 89, and again the only 40 something of them were from actual incidences that weren't like an accident or something else that happened.
Police train for gunfights. Police practice gunfights, and they're going up against some drunk person who pulls out a rifle. They train with tactics all day long for gunfights. I would hope they would win 10 times.
There's tens of millions of interactions.
That's what I'm paying taxes for the
citizens.
police to win gunfights, not lose to criminals.
No, it's not. That's not the
It
point.
didn't even say that they were all like gunfights. They're not all shootouts. It's
The point
like,
is,
But you're saying, why do the police win? Well, of course they're going to win, most of them.
by a factor of I'm saying, why do they think this is such a scary thing that they don't allow other people to be afraid of them coming up guns ablazing, but they get to be that scared when it's the opposite.
I understand that, but there's
Certainly a valid
tens of
point. I get it.
millions of incidents between the police and citizens every year. 0.00 whatever and result in an injury to a citizen.
Correct, and even fewer for an officer by a
But
factor.
you can't compare those. We should. It's not a game. It's not. Oh well, we got to kill more officers this year.
Of course not.
I
Again,
know
anybody losing their life to any of this is awful. But I'm saying I think it's absurd to say that, oh, we just think we're scared for our lives all the time when it's when it's so astronomically the other way. Like you just said, Dave, they have the training for it. They have this. Of course they should. They have the upper hand. They have the power. Of course they should. Right. So then where does this fear come in that somebody's not obeying, somebody's not complying? Mm-hmm.
Because
you guys have control of this.
Because any one of those times that you lose control can be the time.
We just saw it in where was that, Dave? Where the guy the officer was.
Yeah, the cop was super nice and told him, "Come on, get out of the car." And then the guy shot him 6 times with his rifle and killed him and drove away.
So I mean, no cop wants to be that guy.
And no person wants to be the guy that I think gets pulled over for an air freshener in the rearview mirror and dies.
But see, that here is the issue, in my opinion. We are at this place where the police historically have given people reason to be scared. If people are scared now, and it leads them to resist the police, now the police are saying, well, I don't understand why you're scared. I haven't done anything to you, but you can't resist. You're resisting. Well, yeah, I'm resisting. Historically, didn't matter if I resisted or complied, you were still going to kill me. And now we have a cop sitting there on the side of the road going, I'm not going to kill you. You have to comply.
This is, if you took 2 concentric circles and and there's an overlap, the amount of fear is the overlap. Over the years, it has grown to be out of proportion to the reality.
I think that's
both sides.
Huh?
On both sides.
On both sides. Yeah.
Well, what I'm saying, who powers this reality?
Well, clearly the mainstream media power the reality because that's who's telling everyone all their stories, whichever side you're on. I'm not pointing out any one network or source. I'm just saying the media.
The people that work
in the everything
business,
entirely out of context.
The people that work in the business, such as Heather, who sees the defense side of it all and is aware that police use restraint a lot more than they've been
we see.
told.
Absolutely.
I think when we look at the race factor of this, when we're talking about trust in the Black community, there have been, I think, far too many instances where, as a Black citizen, you're harassed by the police. I can attest to that. Just on a personal basis. And I think now that we get into the age of media, video, now the Black community can say, hey, look, see, this is what we've been telling you has been going on forever. And now people are either saying, oh yeah, I can't believe that is happening, or they should be doing A, B, and C. So I think there's this clash between it's happening and why is it happening? And until we come to the middle on taking that overlapping circle that you have and stretching it back out again, it's not going to get any easier. It won't get better. Just going to keep getting worse until we come up with some solution on both sides.
I want to finish trying to figure out and satisfy my curiosity. I still don't understand unlawful seizure, excessive force, illegal search, violating his First Amendment right to free speech, common law assault, battery, and false imprisonment. Heather, are they going to have a hard time in court, or do you think that's easy?
It's not going to be easy. Absolutely not. There are some of them that are better than others. But as I said, I think in the beginning, all of them for sure have a valid basis. They're not just frivolous things just to get back at somebody for, a bad stop. But there are certain things, like, people don't always understand this. It's more of kind of like a legal definition. But assault is any time that you are in imminent, like, you believe that you're imminently about to receive a battery. So people think like, oh, it means that you were hit with something or whatever. That's the battery. But anytime that you believe you're about to receive a battery, that's an assault. So coming at him with with these guns drawn, guns ablaze and whatever, and standing there like, if you don't do this, with what he believed to be no valid legal basis, which again, I don't know how many legal bases they had at certain points. Absolutely, you're going to get the assault. The battery probably too. The unlawful imprisonment starts to get a little shakier, but again, how long do you need to do a stop like this without telling somebody what's going on, or without just getting to the point, without just saying, okay, we just need to run these plates, just give us your license and insurance, belaboring, the time that it needs to take to do something that could be very simple. I'm not saying that any of these will be very straightforward by any means, but I think that they all have a valid basis. Again, I think maybe when you've asked this a couple of times, where did this, like, ultimately, what happened first to make this go wrong? Besides them getting out guns ablaze and screaming, obey, obey, obey. Pepper spraying him, stopping so that he's essentially incapacitated. He now can't see. He said he's having trouble breathing, hands still out. And then he just does it again. I think a third time. Both of those second two times, if the first one already wasn't, are batteries. Unnecessary use of force. Grabbing him out, trying to unlock the car, getting him out, putting him on the ground. Just the rest of it, you don't need to do all of that. Why are they doing it? Why are they doing this?
Can I give you the answer they're going to give you in court? Because he was still resisting.
He wasn't necessarily resisting. He wasn't, as Eric keeps saying, he wasn't necessarily resisting, but just not directly complying immediately in the way that they want is a different story.
Well, I believe at one point he slapped the officer's hands away from him too, and so that would be technically an aggravated battery.
That's an agbat.
He'll never get charged with that.
But he won't, of course not.
And the officers just have to eat that.
I'm failing to see. I just am not getting it. I'm failing to see how in court, when it's so clearly shown that he was in violation of the law, how he's going to be able to say that police committed those crimes on him when in fact that was their policies. And in fact, they de-escalated themselves from a gun to a taser down to pepper spray.
Well, this is civil court.
Right. It's like they're not charging them in criminal court. So
understood. It's civil, so it's really not going to matter. But
it's a preponderance of the evidence.
I was going to say it's not down to reasonable doubt burden. But like Joe just said, it's preponderance. So we call it 50 and a feather, like just like this.
No, you're right. It's civil court, so it's much more about, are people just angry about it and want to,
Well, there's a whole dynamic behind it.
I think
there's legitimate.
I think from his side as an attorney, you're going to throw as much stuff against the wall as you can until something sticks.
Exactly. Like I said, I don't think any of it was frivolous, particularly. I think they all had valid bases, and it'll be a determination of what you can actually kind of work through and see what sticks.
Let me ask you this, Heather, if you were, this is entirely opinion, if you were a lawyer for the police officer in this case, would you at any point say to the soldier, So you did know that it's often said you should pull up to a lit, safe area, but you did not know that it's a law that you have to get out of the car when instructed to?
I might not phrase it like that, but that could be, I see where you're going. Yeah, I understand that. Kind of the selective understanding of the law, you're saying? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That would be a good cross. There's kind of the difference between the law versus like the rights or custom of what's kind of allowed or what's, a regular thing. But
maybe the police would agree with that.
Yeah.
So we're right back to the very first question, which was, we've got all these components. What's justified? What's not justified? Eric, you are back home in Texas. I'm coming to you first. You're not off the hook this week. Walk us through the process. I don't want to know what do we hate and what do we think needs to change in the future. I will almost assuredly agree with you on all of that. Where were the cops wrong and right in this encounter? You can start at the beginning. Walk us through. Tell me where you're at.
Well, I don't know. They found any reason that was justified to initiate a stop. That's well within their rights. Once they turn their lights on, they're expecting you to pull over. Again, I'll repeat, if you are the driver and you do not feel safe in wherever area they were in, then don't pull over. Wait until you find you're in a well-lit area, but call 911 so they know what you're doing and there's no surprises when you get to where you're going. Now, once he got to the gas station and he's pulled over and the officers are pissed off that they had to waste their time for a mile and a half, I just think you still don't. I still don't think it's necessary to escalate that situation. I mean, they were perfectly fine at the end talking to him. Why we can't start there is beyond me. Once they determine that that they're safe, man's hands are out the window. Maybe you've established at that point that there's no one else in the car. Find another way to talk to this person as a human being so you can get what you want and they can get what they need, wherever that is. But it just didn't seem that way. And I think obviously they knew no one was in the car, because once you just de-escalate from a lethal weapon to pepper spray, then you feel safe enough to get close enough to that car, even though he told his partner at one time not to approach the car, stayed back. So it's at some point the officer wanted to get what he wanted, no matter what it took. And you were going to listen to him no matter what. But man, even if you didn't call 911, there's a officer of the law with a gun asking you to do something. You need to do it. You can go back to court, file a report afterwards if you need to, a complaint. But man, it is not worth your life. It is not worth you being injured because you disagree with what they're doing at the time. So on both ends, there was some right, there was some wrong.
Some of this is starting to make me think that how we have, Miranda warnings. I wonder if there should be something where if you're pulled over, they need to be like, you have this right, but also we have the right to ask you out of the car, and you by law have to comply if we ask you out of the vehicle. Like, just so that there's no discrepancies here. So it's very clear from both sides, this has to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That it could become part of the common lexicon. A
standard, part of the greeting.
Yeah, just the way they say you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say, everyone knows that one. Everyone can recite it.
Mm-hmm.
Just sure. That if pulled over and asked, you need to get out of the vehicle. I think a lot of that would be so simple that people would be like, really? And they're like, yeah, You know, I luckily tell my clients, like I said, that they have to, and so they get it. They just do what I tell them to record it if they can, and just in case body cams don't work or whatever. But
I would hope people would believe that. And maybe before a confrontation begins, they might believe that. But once a confrontation begins, I've sure seen a lot of people tell the police, that's not true. I know my rights. I don't have to get out.
you've seen people say that they know their rights, that they don't have to get out.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, I've seen that a lot.
I'll
Yeah.
show you 1,000 videos on social media right now.
Yeah.
Of people insisting you don't have to get out of the car.
But the bottom line is they're out of the car. So one way or the other.
Eventually, and then they're angry because they got pulled out of the car.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And now they want to know, why is that cop such a bully? I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't have to get out of the car.
Right. But again, just for such a simple thing that I guess if you'd start to realize by now that people really don't know, they really don't know that they don't have a right to stay in the car. You know.
But is a police officer, if they believe it the first time, great. If they want to argue about it, how much time is a cop supposed to stand there saying, okay, you want me to show you the law? No, really, I can do this. No, really, you have to. Before they say, explaining this to you is not my job. My job is getting you out of the car.
Correct. Yeah. At that point, once their duty has surpassed, like once they've said the words, the magic words or whatever, these are your rights. Here's our rights. Then if they don't comply, then again, they can be charged with resisting arrest or, you know, anything else that can happen. And then they can use reasonable means to get them where they need them. There's just something, again, that Eric was just saying, that I go back and forth depending who I'm defending or what type of case it is, or what motion or hearing, or if it's a trial, where I'll ask if the officers drew their weapons upon approaching a vehicle, to essentially figure out if they actually were concerned or fearful for their safety. Because if they just like go up and they're like, oh no, everything's fine, they don't have any concern, you know, they're not concerned whatsoever, they just walk up, nobody has a gun drawn or on their hip or any hand on their hip or anything, it becomes less reasonable to believe that they were all of a sudden very, very afraid for their safety or for their life. So, but then you go the other way, and again, we see kind of the de-escalation from guns to tasers to pepper spray. And again, then you have to realize, okay, so at that juncture, they did realize, we don't feel that this is something that requires us, you know, pointing guns at his head. Why then was there still the disconnect of this just power, like, dynamic of just do what I say or else? Like it doesn't need to be that way. If you can reasonably assess the situation and see what's going on, approach the vehicle. He's asking you what's going on. Just tell him, what's the problem? What's the issue there? Once, like we said, we realize, okay, his hands are out, he's being calm, he's in uniform. Just be like, can we see your license and insurance? There's an issue with your plates, with your registration. What's going on? And he could explain it. Or, you know, ask him out of the vehicle. And if he really is like, can you guys just please tell me what's going on? What exactly is the harm there in telling him what's going on?
Joe?
Yeah, that was the essence of the disconnect right at that point. He didn't believe he had to get out of the car. They weren't going to go any further and de-escalate, any verbal de-escalation and until he did.
Right.
And that was the essence of the chief's press conference at the end, where he's saying, boy, I wish he would have complied earlier, but he did de-escalate relative to weapon, to taser, to whatever, but it was not a verbal de-escalation. And it was like, hey, we can't go it was like, okay, we're stuck on this point because we can't go past A until you comply, until you get out of the car. Well, I don't think I have to get out of the car. I don't believe I have to get out of the car. And he was he was scared. So all understandable. But again, this should never have happened. I don't care what they needed to do to make it work. What the police need to do to make it work and what citizens need to do to make it work needs to get done. Because otherwise it's just going to get worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. There needs to be a reckoning of an understanding of an education just around the board on what can happen, what needs to happen, and what we all need to do.
I uh, I don't want to waste our time and effort with trying to label anything justified or unjustified. First of all, there is a court case that's going to happen. Second of all, I think with an instance like this, it's more complicated than at any 1 minute what's justified, what's not. It's much more complicated than that in this encounter. I think we would be selling all parties involved short to try to label this one thing justified or unjustified. This is a very difficult situation. And I think it's maybe more difficult than a lot of people realize for all the reasons that we've talked about here. I think a lot of people are looking at that video, some of the general public, and they're saying, what's the problem? He doesn't have to get out of the car. And some of them are saying, well, I don't understand. Why would you ever draw your guns on anybody, sitting in a car? I mean, there's a lot of people with questions that they just don't understand the context. And then there is some context here that just didn't make sense. Some of the encounters, some of the things that cop said, we've all covered it already. There is right and wrong. There was fault and not fault. There was justified and unjustified across the board in this whole instance. And so I want to forfeit that verdict tonight because I don't think it's fitting in a case like this. I think we're better off just looking at how many issues in our culture this individual case is really representing, and leave me with some final thoughts. Joe?
Final thought is I think that we as a country have to do what we need to do to stop this. And it's not a matter of race or anything. I mean, well, the officer got fired. He was a minority. So, I mean, it has to be, again, I think Eric is right here. It has to go down to humanity. I'm not saying that officers should just walk up willy-nilly to some car and forfeit all their security. But I think there's, like I say, if there was an app on the phone that so they could press to say, hey, because people don't believe an officer if they say you have to get out of the car. They won't believe the officer if they don't trust officers to begin with.
Right.
Okay. So again, you can't have a supervisor jump over to every traffic stop that goes to, because it's not going to happen. All right. So it's a process that has to start at one block, another block, on top of another block. And the problem is that we do that. We start to build it, and then something happens, and some episode happens. It's like, what we've done as a society is we've come legislation by episode. We see an episode of something and say, oh my God, this is what happened. We have to outlaw this, okay? Because this is what happened here. Instead of taking a rational step-by-step approach and seeing how widespread this is. So we build up these blocks, and then an episode comes up, an incident comes up and knocks them all down again. We have to stop that. We have to stop doing that and say, hey, this is maybe a setback, but we need to keep moving forward.
Eric?
I think Joe just said it all. I mean, humanity. I think it's the only thing that I think it's the direction that our society in general needs to move towards. So I think we start there.
Heather, any wise words of court wisdom?
I think it goes back to making sure people are all educated. The more ignorant people are of their own rights, of other people's rights, of things that are kind of going on in the country, just even thinking about something like the Second Amendment, that people think they understand what it means and they haven't even read it, educating people on all of this, making it a class in school. Who cares during driver's ed, or like Joe said, if you go to the DMV when you're going to do your driver's test, some of the questions are about what police officers are entitled to do, what your rights are, etc. Just so that we all are on the same page. And I think that would quell a lot of the fears of officers out in the field who are just trying to keep themselves and everybody else safe. And, I think it would alleviate a lot of the issues that go on with, again, people thinking they have rights that they don't. It's, like I keep saying, a lot of my clients tell me constantly that they feel lucky that I that I'm there to tell them, here's what's going on, do this, and I'll fix it later. But a lot of people, most people don't have that luxury and just kind of don't really know what's going on. So I think the more we can educate everyone, the public, the police, just everybody as to what's going on, who's in their neighborhoods, you know, who are the people that we are helping, that we are policing. I think, yeah, just making sure everyone's educated on everything, I think that would help us greatly to move forward. And like Joe said, sometimes there's going to be setbacks. Of course there are in anything you do, but you can't just start from scratch every time that happens. You have to pick up the pieces where you were and hopefully move forward. And I think a lot of that would be very much helped by people understanding just simple things.
What I'm hearing is humanity and education. We need everybody to know the same rules and laws. And we need to understand that we're all playing this game together. We're all on this board. And if we can't treat each other with just a little bit more humanity, a little bit more care for what's best for each other, and combine that with a universal list of rules. Here are the rules of the game. I can only imagine if we had both of those things, what sort of an impact those two things properly administered could have on the culture that we're living in today.
You know,
I think it starts exactly there, David, where it starts with humanity first and then education. Because there's still people out there that they still want to believe what they want to believe, and or they don't agree with whatever the rules are. But where we see these problems happen, and it could be police related or not, it has to do with someone's humanity and someone trying to take it away from another. And I think that's number one. That's where we have to start.
You know, Dave, the other thing is that struck me also is that we've talked about what the police want, what the people want, what the police want. It's not the police. The police are representatives of the government. The government sets the standards of what they need. They have a right to have crimes investigated. They have a right to have a crime when you go commit a felony, the state is the victim, not the particular victim. The state is the victim. So therefore, we're all the victims. So if we all looked at this as saying, "Oh, I'm not doing this because I'm a police officer, and you're not doing this because you want to, because a policeman tells you to do this." This is what we need to do to maintain some kind of order in our society. Look what's happening here. People take oaths and then they violate them, like because they don't like this law, they're not going to enforce it. They don't like this policy. Police officers don't like this or whatever. They're not going to do it. You can't do that. There's a higher power here.
It's something that I've been saying just to, I guess, throw us entirely off track before we get out of here. The mask issue, that people think they don't have to do it. They're above this. It's violating my rights. Okay. If you're going into a private place and they say you have to wear a mask, you have to wear a mask. If you don't want to wear it, you don't have to be in the store. Right. So I've been saying with this whole thing of the vaccination and herd immunity, if you don't want to be part of the herd, you don't want to get the vaccine, you're not entitled to the protections of the herd or the benefits of the herd. So if you don't think you need to comply with the laws and regulations of the state or the city or wherever you're in, you can be stopped, you can be detained, you can be jailed, and you can go to trial, you can go to prison. Fantastic. So yeah, there's just something about if you think you're not part of this, there are ways that we have to do that in order to keep decorum. Otherwise, there would be nothing. There would just be chaos. There would be utter chaos.
Freedom is a very powerful thing, but we all know that with power comes responsibility, and you can't use freedoms because freedom is about the most easily abusable thing. Absolutely. And about the first thing to be lost.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of responsibility that comes with loving being an American. Thank you all for being here.
Thank all of you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Joe.
There you have it, everyone. This case is not nearly as simple or as straightforward as you may have been led to believe. According to our lawyer, our detective, and our author, There are a great many factors at play in this case. There is right and wrong. There was good and bad. There was justified and unjustified on both sides of this case. Meanwhile, if we missed something, if we got something wrong, or if you have an opinion that you have just got to share with us, please go ahead and email us right now at info@beforethecourttv.com. info@beforethecourttv.com. Until next time, I'm Dave Cupp. We'll see you on the very next episode of Before the Court.